live. Live, 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 live. I know, Gary, we're 4 minutes late. I'm hoping to have something really good for us. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Hey guys, welcome back to Tested Normal.
This is Jordan.
This is Curtis.
I was like, wait, are you gonna say it? Am I gonna say it?
This is a podcast where we talk about anything and everything we want to. This is episode 87, I believe.
87? Yeah, last week was 86.
Correct?
So that flies, I think. Yeah.
Sounds accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you all have had a fantastic week enjoying the stress-free world. No big controversial topics to really discuss this week. There was no actually really not much really crazy compared to the week before. Like there was some crazy stuff, but compared to the week before,
I don't know. There's been
rather
some weird stuff like happening. It's just that none of us know like what it means. Like that, I think that's what's weird to me.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. What dabble on? What are some of those weird things that have been happening that nobody knows what it means, Jordan?
Well, number one, we have where I just was in DC. There's upwards of going to be 30,000 troops, and they're like marching around and setting up stuff. And the Associated Press released a thing today that said they're concerned that there might be people within the military that are going to try to rise up and do something. But yet, if you read through their article, it said, but they've already been vetting and they find no reason to be concerned. It's like, okay, well, which one is it? Are you trying to make it sound like something's going to happen, but it's not? We got these weird guys. I don't know if I've watched some videos of people at different capitals. I think it was Michigan Capitol, and it was, no joke, this is a group. They're called the Boogaloos, and they and they associate a lot with they associate but they're like friendly to like BLM and Antifa, unlike the Proud Boys, but they had like rainbow flags on and stuff, and they're protesting at these capitals that people have been told don't go there because we think there's going to be armed people, and they came with guns.
Well, the Boogaloos, though, what's unique about them is they're not wearing rainbow shirts. What they're wearing is Hawaiian
rainbow
like
flags,
your
like in their.
But they're no. But what their main thing is that they are wearing those classic Hawaiian shirts, like that, middle-aged dads would wear.
The guys I saw were in full battle stuff, and they had flags on, and they had AR-15s.
Right, but like what gave the Boogaloo like their name is what they're like the trending popular thing about them is that they wear those Hawaiian shirts, and they may have like different gear, or whatever, different people, but like their main thing that's making them popular is that they're associating more with certain conservative movements, not necessarily as much as the liberal movements, is what they've made their name for in the past several months, essentially. Yeah. So. Dude, something. Oh, dude, are those comments coming through on the bottom?
I think so. This is what I was trying to mess with, Gary. There we go.
So I don't know if that's working, Gary Chandler. I think our comments might be coming through on the bottom.
I'm gonna transition this over, and now they're bigger. Look at that.
Okay, so before we get to that question, something else that's hilarious that happened this week. That is ridiculous, though, also at the same time. I'm sure many people have heard about this already, but in Oregon recently, in Beaverton, Oregon, has anybody out there heard about what happened with the carjacking situation?
This is tell the story. You tell. I'm going to try not to interrupt
bananas.
This week. Okay.
So, a mom had left her kid in the car and walked they said it was about 15 feet away to like just a local convenience store where she could still see the kid in the car, but she left the kid in the car in an SUV, and she was getting some milk. Well, in the time where she was walking into the store, another guy came up, noticed that the vehicle was unlocked, stole the car, drove off, Well, he got about a block away and realized that the kid was in the back of the car. So he freaks out. He's like, I didn't want to go down for child kidnapping. So he drives back, parks the car, finds the mom, whose the car it is, starts yelling at her, saying, "You're a terrible person for leaving your child in this vehicle," and then threatens to call the police on her, chews
Right.
into her. And then before like, she can call the police or anything like that, he steals
Right.
the car again, takes the kid out of the car, steals the car, and he's still on the loose. They haven't found him.
Right. Yeah,
The dude in the car
have
is
not
still
found this dude yet. It's he chewed her out. I don't even know.
I think that's quite a feat, I would say, of I don't know if I'd call it bravery or stupidity, I guess, at the same time. But I mean, to his credit, at least he recognized, I didn't want, this is going to go from, Grand Theft Auto to Amber Alert situation.
Right. Well, imagine his surprise when he was like, I just wanted a free car. And then he realized he got a kid. And he's like, no, this is what I signed up for. And so he sent it back. And then they said in Bill, that's amazing. They said in the report, they said she didn't do anything wrong. She was actually only like 15 feet away. But they advised her next time not to leave the car running. She had left the keys in the car running. And they said, you leaving your child there was no problem. Everyone could see him. You could see him. She just went in like 15 feet to grab milk and watched it happen. Like everyone in the store watched it happen.
Oh, okay. So the police, so that's the other thing. Like sometimes I feel weird about like, is it illegal to leave my kid in the car if the car's running and I can see them, that sort of distance? Sometimes you just got to get out and get in real quick,
Right.
I don't know. But yeah, that's a pretty wild story for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to that question. What was it? Was the Capitol an inside job? So it's
okay. So I'm gonna bring that comment up so people know what we're talking about. So because now I can do this, guys. This is you have no idea. This changes my world that we can have this up like this. So I don't know. I would, if you're talking about, there's a couple different capitals. Oregon had they're going after a representative right now, and you can go look up the video. I don't have the link for it in our notes, sorry. I saw it the other day where he walked out of the Capitol and left the door open and a bunch of people got in. That was a few weeks ago. And they're like, oh, he did it on purpose. I watched the video. I'm like, the dude was careless, but I don't think he meant to do it. He just was dumb. And
are you talking about the Washington Capitol?
This is when the guys in Oregon got arrested and stuff. As far as the yeah, as far as
put on your tinfoil hat, guys.
I don't know. I that video I published last week in our notes has been deleted, and the guy who took that video got arrested, and so, but then he was released, which was a little bit strange. That they released him, at least in my opinion. But who knows? I'm not the FBI or the police, so. But in his video, there was a CNN videographer who was there, and no one's talked to her as far as I can see in the news and everything. That seems a little strange. But also there's previous videos of him working, and there was a video that I saw yesterday that came out that appears to show, allegedly, that there were people already inside, and they break out a window to escape, and they get out a window next to guards that are standing facing out from the Capitol and just walk away. Like, they just walked away. And so I don't know. There's been a lot of people that have quit. There's been people who have been, died of suicide.
I think it's a little bit of both in some ways, maybe. I mean, potentially, like, I don't think it's an absolute one person was responsible for the entire action and riot. I think that there was definitely people that were acting as incendiary or acting to kind of fan the flames. But then also I think there were guards that were like, shit, I'm not going to fight against thousands of people that are coming in here. I'm not going to take that beating, But then there was also people that are like, yeah, we're in support of this too. So I think it was a combination.
Says, for sure that it was. And it's, it's the thing. It's like we can all have our opinions. I don't know that we'll ever know. I know that from being there that there was very little security. If that crowd had decided that they wanted to lift up the Capitol and move it down next to the White House, they could have. There wasn't anything anyone was going to do to stop them. But I know that most of the people didn't do anything that they shouldn't have done. Or some of them did things that they didn't know they weren't supposed to do because they had no idea and it was just a giant cluster. And there were people walking through the crowd, even by myself, that were trying to incite people to go in. So I don't know. Maybe it was an inside job. Maybe it was partially inside job. Maybe people did things that they weren't supposed to. I think a lot of people went in that didn't plan to until they got there and then were incited to do so. And that doesn't mean that they're not wrong. But I don't know, and I don't know that we will ever know. I hope we do for curiosity's sake. But
dude, so a comment I heard from the Apple CEO, who I guess ultimately would make some of the major decisions for what's on the App Store, made a comment this week saying that they would allow Parler back on if they made certain amendments and adjustments to their policies and procedures. Have you heard anything else as far as this week, as far as certain apps being continually banned, being let back on?
So was that Apple or Amazon? Because I didn't read that.
That was Apple CEO Tim Cook, right?
I didn't read that. What they wanted them to do was they wanted Parler to do more moderation. Right? But as far as I've read and the reports that I went through, I don't think that they did anything wrong. In fact, they have proof that they were moderating like they should be. The only thing they weren't moderating was views on the right that Apple may think are incorrect. But there's a ton of incorrect things on YouTube, on Facebook. I mean, we all know that. Like that there's going to be things that aren't untrue, and it's not up to them to necessarily decide that. If it is, then they have a lot more work to do, and they're not doing it either. So I don't know. I don't know what the thinking is there, because even Gab, who doesn't have an app on there, they've been getting a lot of flack too. And quite honestly, they've done a lot more moderation of things because they don't have groups. So they don't have groups that can organize things. It would have to be through threads and stuff like that. So it really was traced back to Facebook was an organizer or hosted a lot of these organizations that were trying to incite some of these things that happened on the 6th. That's already been proven. They just don't talk about it, and it's sad. I don't think that even Facebook should be held accountable because they're under Section 230, which means they're not a media outlet. They're not, and it mainly means they're not responsible for what people post on there. But things that are illegal, I think, should be removed as best they can. And it's interesting because I have an article here that we in our notes, and I can put it up in a minute or just have it in our show notes. But Canada just found that, in fact, people can sue Twitter for things put up. So someone put a defamation type comment up, and a rich guy sued them in court and won in Canada. And because he had asked for Twitter to take it down and they did not, and they don't have Section 230, so they're not protected. And so that was interesting. I think that will set a precedence going forward for different countries to consider that. I don't think they should be held liable for that. I think the individual should be, but that's kind of what they're dancing around when they start to edit the content and put themselves outside of being social media into kind of a media outlet, in my opinion.
So, yeah, and we've touched on this before, guys. I know a bit, but hey, David, hey, buddy, but I wanted to kind of bring up a topic. I know I talk about this a lot. There's a guy that was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently. His name's Ira Glasser. Speaking of Joe Rogan, I was talking with some friends tonight. Chris and Ashley, shout out. Hey guys, steaks were good.
Thanks for inviting me.
But
just kidding. I don't care.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. But Ira Glasser, he was a former kind of one of the chiefs. Not chiefs, I don't know if that's the right way, executive director of ACLU. And so for certain civil liberties, right?
Sorry guys, I'm gonna turn that off. That's my bad.
So Ira Glasser was on the podcast. He was one of the executive directors with ACLU, right? So ACLU is for civil liberties, right? And they try to fight for certain rights that we have. Some people don't like some of the things the ACLU does. Some people really like the things that ACLU does. They actually have found a lot of cases that they are supportive of things that are very conservative, very liberal, middle ground, centrist, all of the above. But Ira Glass, I would encourage you guys to listen to that podcast because he talked about this whole entire controversy specifically over social media platforms and certain free speech. And he actually came at it from a legal standpoint, as far as saying, these are private companies, and then talking about how they should have the rights to dictate what they want to allow on their sites. However, what's unique about it is in our current situation, we kind of are at a new precedence, being that these are some of the main platforms that people are able to have their
Mm-hmm.
voices heard. And when it's almost a kind of monopoly-like platform, then is there certain civil liberties that are being taken away? But here's the caveat with that. He brought up a really good point. He said, although there is such a reliance on social media for people to get their opinion out and to have a platform, it's actually, even despite the certain maybe regulations that these social media platforms are making, people still have a far more opportunity and much wider range to get their voice and opinion out than what they did before the internet was around. Because when you want to talk about actual monopolies, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, most of it was a group of like three main TV broadcasters and a couple news websites or newspaper platforms. So if you wanted to get your word out, or what your opinion was, you had to get on to this larger media platform, and it was very, very difficult. So the opportunity you have to have your opinion broadcast to the world is exponentially greater, even despite if these companies have more regulation right now. So that was kind of an interesting opinion on his part and
Well,
input.
to add
So I
to
would
that,
recommend
like,
that.
because I listened to I read some transcripts from that, and I was like, yeah, it's a there needs to be some precedent set around it, and there hasn't been except for Section 230, and that's really only the United States. We saw Uganda last week cut off Twitter and Facebook the 2 days before their election because they said, you guys are meddling in our election, you're done, and they blocked them in their country because of it, and that's because of a lack of regulation in other countries. We really only have this one thing, Section 230, which doesn't protect a user; it protects the company.
The company,
Something that I was reading, and I
right?
think I sent it to you, I'll put it up here on the screen here, is that former Facebook insider Alex Stamos tells Brian Sellers of CNN, we have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN. So that's just one thing that was put out there, mind you. So that there was another, I don't know if I can find it, but there was another thing, but that stated kind of the same thing. It was like, free speech means all speech. So when I say I'm for free speech, I'm for those I don't agree with too.
Yeah,
And there was a good quote
exactly.
that I read that was like, the most important speech for you to defend is that which disgusts you. Because
Well, and that's exactly what this ACLU executive director was talking. He's like, and it's really controversial, but he was talking on the point of, I am a fervent advocate for hate
mm,
speech, is what he was saying. And oftentimes, like you were saying, hate speech, when somebody interprets something as hate speech, it's this type of speech that they don't like. But that doesn't mean necessarily it's hate speech for another individual. And so that's kind of like a really inflammatory thing to kind of hear, and it sounds like it tastes really
well,
bad to
I
hear.
read something that was really
Does that make
convincing
sense?
today. It's
But
like, and I can't remember who the author was. I don't have the link for it, but you could probably Google just this phrase. He said there hate speech. I think it was on Joe Rogan. It was a transcript I read of his where he said hate speech doesn't exist. That there is no such thing as hate speech because it's always subjective to the person that's judging it. And so you can't do that because you never know who's going to be the person to say we need to remove it. And he was talking about in the grounds of free speech that we can't label things that way because that becomes dangerous, because tomorrow it could be you, because it would change who was
well,
altering it.
yeah, and the other thing is, kind of a good perspective, kind of to connect into that is, I I am kind of for, though, also the companies being able to decide what who they want to provide those platforms to. rather than the government dictating and saying, hey, this is allowed to be said versus this is
Hmm.
not allowed to be said. Because once you get the government dictating what is a okay thing to say and what is not an okay thing to say and regulating that, that's where
Well,
I think you get
I'm
into
not
a
even
much more
saying
slippery
it
slope.
shouldn't be any more complicated than the First Amendment. And that is, you can say it. They gave the protection to them to put it on their platform. It's not a protection to say that the person can do something illegal. The people should be held totally liable for that. But what they said was, we protect you from what they're saying because they may have a view you don't align with, and we have the First
Yeah.
Amendment. And so there isn't anything more complicated than the First Amendment, which is to say you can't change how I feel and how I express myself. But when you, there was something I thought about, and it was an interview that I was reading. It was a news anchor, and I can't remember what news anchor where she was from, but she was being deplatformed because she was a conservative person. And she said, I can't even get my kids' schedule because it's all sent out via Facebook, and they blocked me for no reason. I didn't post anything, but because I showed up on a news channel, they didn't like it. I got blocked along with a bunch of other conservative people. I can't get the notifications from my child's school. And so when you create this monopoly of a system that's used for things like that, and you provide them as a service for people to use, that would be like removing someone's phone because they talked about something you didn't like. And so it's you step into this.
Yeah, I would be interested to see a social media platform, I guess, or a conservative. I mean, I know we're hearing this talking about how liberal, maybe leaning platforms are restricting certain
Mhm.
conservative voices, but I don't think it'd be a surprising thing to hear that, what is it,
Oh,
AON or OAN? I would not be surprised if certain conservative
they're
platforms are
not.
doing the same
They're
thing
definitely
to
not, because
liberal
Gab and
voices.
Parler both put out things saying, we want people to come here, come talk about your liberal ideas. They're fine. We believe in free speech.
No, no, no. Not Gab and Parler,
But
but I'm saying, like, I
but
bet
say that's not
AON
their
network
network.
doesn't
So
have a ton
you're
of
comparing
liberal
the
voices
OAN
either.
channel to the network. So they're on a network. Now get this. So it's I'm glad that you brought that up because it's a perfect segue to this next thing that I was going to bring up. So look at this. Jack Posobiec is on OAN. He said CNN calls for their competition to be shut down 1 week after they gave the guy a platform, the domestic terrorist. Now this guy right here, he's the one who shot the video that I referenced last week and is a known BLM organizer. Okay, John Sullivan. He's been
Right.
all over the news. Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast have answered any questions about why they beam channels like OAN and Newsmax into millions of homes. Do they have any second thoughts about disrupting these channels given their election denialism content? So he's saying, I don't even want them to be on cable network news. He's asking for them to be removed because he didn't agree
Right.
with what they said. And
I
so
I didn't know
they
OAN
are.
was
They're
on
on
cable
some,
news.
and so is Newsmax. And so they're
Oh,
asking
I
them,
didn't know that.
hey, they probably shouldn't be there. And they're asking for their competition because they don't agree with what they said to be
Right.
removed.
I'm
So
not surprised.
that
Yeah.
would be like them getting, so the network would be like a Facebook because everyone's there, and if all your content is there, they're saying
Right.
they shouldn't be
Yeah.
allowed to be there because I don't agree
Yeah.
with them. But the network,
Mhm.
they're not even the network. They're advocating for the removal of them from it. And
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
dangerous.
I don't know. I don't agree with it, but I think it's also that network's choice
It
what
is that
they
network's
who they want to
choice, but
host.
it would be like you're asking for the competition to be removed is what you're doing. There's two things that they said this week that
Yeah, of course.
that are
Yeah, I
horrifying,
think
and
that's
it's
what they're
something
asking
that
for.
I started to think about last week, is that news agencies have been losing their platform for a while. They lost them to people checking the news on their social media and reading headlines, which isn't the greatest way to get your news at all, um, all throughout the day instead of waiting to listen to them regurgitate it to them in the evening. And so they're upset that there's these influencers out there. There's left leaning influencers and there's right leaning influencers. They haven't said anything about the left leaning ones. And with this whole like Twitter purge and everything, like I watched a guy, a statistician that was brought in to go over the network, the election numbers. He hadn't posted anything in a very long time on Twitter. As he was giving his presentation to a Senate hearing in Arizona, they removed him from Twitter. He hadn't posted anything yet.
Oh, but because of what he was support who well, but there had to been some type
No,
of grounds for the banning
No,
or the
they don't.
removal.
In fact, I've seen screenshots from multiple people that said they
That's
got banned, and the reason is left blank.
suspicious.
It's a colon. It says you were banned for colon and nothing, and then it shows how long you're going to be banned. So that's where it's dangerous. If they're going to if we let them deplatform people for things other than things that are illegal, then we run into this problem. And so there shouldn't.
That's a hard thing to say though, because it's like when you say if we let them deplatform people, I again, I personally don't feel like it's I don't feel like it's somebody's right. If I have my own private business, and just hear me out. If I have my own private business, I don't feel like it's your right to tell me what type of uh, soup I can and can't serve at my business. And that's a very, 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 very boiled down like analogy there. I know that. I recognize that with a lot of variables, but it's a it's a difficult balance when you start having government dictating what a private company can and can't do. Can you post David's comment
I
there?
just saw it. Thanks, Anthony.
So I'll just read it.
No, so it's a network's choice, but it's an inherent conflict of interest and should be discarded as such. So this is where let me speak to that real quick. The difference between your example and what these network companies are, what these companies are doing is they've gotten to the point now where they're so large, they've become a utility. And if you want to argue with me, we go back to the whole Facebook thing and groups for schools and stuff like that. If you remove someone's platform from that and they can no longer access that because it's being used like a utility, we have a problem. It's not your private company more, because if you provide, like, say, all the cakes in a city, then it would be really hard for me to argue that you can't provide a cake to a certain person. But if another cake company pops up and you go to the person that provides the ingredients and say, don't even give them the ingredients because I don't want them here, that's a problem. And that's what's going on right now. They're cutting off the food source.
I guess I think it's a little bit, I see it a little bit differently.
Clearly.
I see it as clearly, right? I think it would be more like if I would be more concerned if the government was saying you're not allowed to provide this type of ingredient or sell this ingredient to this individual, and therefore they cannot then bake these cakes. I think that I'm always going to say, if you want to beat bad speech, you beat it with better speech. And if you want to have a platform such as OAN or Facebook or Twitter or Parler, I think that even if it starts small and it starts little and you have a small hosting network, if you have a small server, you do your own thing. I think you have to start somewhere where you're not relying necessarily on those larger companies. And I know there's a lot of infrastructure issues with that, but I think it can be done. And I think that eventually a small cake shop has to start their own path. And if that's the path that needs to be done and you don't agree with the other way the cake shops are doing it, you need to start your own.
Do you understand what happened is exactly what I just described? So Parler did. They have their own platform, their own app. They had their...
No. They didn't use their own server. It doesn't matter. Though. They don't have their own server.
There are so many companies that use those servers, like we talked about, that have inappropriate content on them. That was a 3-part collusion to get them removed, and that's been proven now. That there was messaging going back and forth. That not only they've provided the emails that Parler was getting now, that was asking, hey, is President Trump coming to your platform? Is President Trump coming to your platform? And when they couldn't get an answer, then they cut them. So it was a collusion between the companies to do so. And so that's the problem. I understand when it's a private company, but when you are almost the sole provider of something and you've become a utility. So telephone companies used to be private, and now they're regulated as a utility for a reason. It's so this stuff can't happen.
And that may be something that, as our laws develop, I mean, look at the newspapers. There was a time where the printing press, right? There wasn't certain laws for media with printing press. And then I think, in the 1800s or whatever, they started instituting laws as far as being able to have freedom of speech for
Mhm.
media as well. And I think that that might be something that as we grow as a country and we start experiencing new technologies, there's probably going to be new laws that provide people that type of opportunity. And that may be the solution then as well. Maybe the solution isn't necessarily coming up and creating your own server and then your own app and then your own, platform. Maybe it's, you know, lobbying for change with regulation and laws.
Yeah,
That's
I think
another
that's the
option.
problem is that
If,
we've seen it slowly like move this direction, and all of a sudden it moved real quick to the point where they would deplatform a president. And I think it's a really good it's easy to say in a country where we do have currently still we have free speech that you would anyone that has a platform where you like make a comment, say like YouTube or whatever like that, if there's something where speech is a thing, it's logical to say that the right that we have is on there because they're a primary predominant platform, or don't build those platforms. So it's like I can't go build my own electrical grid because it would cause issues. So if you aren't going to work underneath the law of free speech, sorry, you can't have that platform. You can't be that person. You can't be an electrician without getting regulated. You can't be, a plumber without getting the right stuff. You can't there's rules you have to follow in order to be in certain industries.
mhm,
And this is one we haven't touched because
yeah,
we didn't realize how
yeah,
big it was getting. So it's not
right.
about like I totally get if someone like commits a murder on their platform, delete it. Like that's fine. Like that's
Mhm,
illegal. Do it.
yeah.
But to say I don't align politically with that, so go find your own platform is
Well, and
is
that's where
super
the
bad.
gray line kind of comes in. That's where there is kind of a level of discretion that a company has to make as far as determining whether something is in that term of inciting violence, right? Or is it causing harm, potential harm to individuals by what their comment and their influence is? Um, and so I think that that is an issue that we look at the what is it? The ruler of Iran? Was it Iran or Pakistan? I can't remember. He makes
Oh yeah.
tweets frequently about death to America, kill infidels, like really
Right.
inflammatory comments, right? Um, and those oftentimes I've seen them, they haven't been taken down. So the question
Well,
is,
by your logic,
is there a
it's their
regulation,
business.
and to what degree should they? Right. Well, that's what I'm saying exactly. Like if a plumber has to abide by certain rules, maybe people that use these social media apps have to
Well,
abide by
there's
certain
user
rules too.
agreements.
I mean, that's exactly it. And so if Trump had a user agreement, or if the ruler of Iran has a user agreement saying, I'm not going to incite violence, or I'm not going to use my political influence to sway people towards my political view based on some type of threats or
Right.
anything like that, that could be something that a company has to decide. Listen, they're not abiding by our rules, so we're going to
So
dump
David brings
them.
up what is you regulate the use, and then someone you don't agree with begins to regulate that utility. Absolutely, and that's why I would say it should just be a constitutional thing. We have the First Amendment; it's the first one for a reason, because we should all be able to speak freely. If it's a, I think logically, if it's a platform where you speak or you make your ideas known in that way, at least in our country, it should fall under that. Like logically, it should fall under that. And if they want to remove it, then they've now become a media editor and they can be sued. And let people sue them, because that's what happened in Canada.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Individuals
If
basically
you're
then
a
being held
speech
accountable for their
platform,
own
you're the
individual
same as a
posts.
phone. You
Yeah.
can't pull them. You can't do anything to them unless they're doing something illegal, and you can prove it. Otherwise, now you become a media platform, and we will now you fall into that. There's no more protections, and the person can sue you, because that's what's happening in Canada, and they're getting sued for millions of dollars. And they're gonna try to defend it, but so far, that's what's going on, and it's easy. It's not a then it's not a regulation of the company. It's saying if you're for speech, then you follow our laws in our country. What other countries do is fine.
Dude,
Here, this. Hang on just a second.
speaking of,
One more. This is a question that came in.
yeah,
Um, how do
okay, go
we
for it.
lobby against companies that are backed by billions of dollars? The majority of our politicians are for sale. This is something that's come up in conversations I've had with people outside of this podcast. This is a good point. When they become that large, it's really hard to start something of your own. As we've seen, they kind of work together to get people that they don't like out because they don't like competition. Just like CNN asking for Newsmax and all those guys to be
Mhm.
off their platform, that should be illegal for them to just go out and call out their deplatforming their competition because they don't like them. I think that should be regulated. I
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. I guess it gets to the point of where and when you have a free market and when the free market gets impeded by a monopoly. And that is something that is really hard to control if a company has more money than you and can lobby
right.
better
Yeah.
lawyers than you.
It's it's scary because then it's like that's why the vote thing matters so much, regardless of where you fall in that.
Right,
Is that
totally.
the only thing that makes us all the same? That makes us all have the same voice and everything is that we have one vote, no matter how much money I do or don't make, no matter how big of a house I have or don't have, is that a vote matters. And so and free speech, it's the same thing. That's what makes us all equal in this country. I mean, it's described as an inalienable right, a logical right that is God given.
Ooh, so something that it's not necessarily voting, but that really kind of bugged me this week that I heard about. There was it has, whatever your views are on COVID and vaccines and your kind of stance on that. Something that I really made me nervous was I heard someone say, Charles Barkley said this. I think it was, or was it Shaquille O'Neal? No, I think it was Charles Barkley.
You're such a
Um,
racist.
he said, um,
They don't look alike at all.
what? Um, so they're on the same
Oh
show
yeah,
together. That's
right.
why. Um, so he's Charles. I'm pretty sure it was Charles Barkley. He said, "Well, I think that people that pay more in taxes should get their vaccines first because we contribute more money to the country." And I was thinking about like, oh my God, what a terrifying thought that is. As far as if we're doing some type of like social program to individuals and to the people in our nation, like prioritizing the wealthy basically is what that is, right? And it's, whoever's poor, you're screwed. Whoever's wealthy, you get the vaccine first. It's like, oh my God, what if they did that with like voting? What if they did some type of like, you get 100 votes because you're the wealthiest,
There was something
or
I saw
whatever, that is. That's kind of
there
a
was something I saw
terrifying thought.
today that was along the health lines. I was like, yeah, I would be for this. I think you would be totally against it. So I wanted to bring it up. I forgot about it until you said all that. Um, is there was going to be an amendment to our Constitution that was similar to free speech, and it was dealing with your own health. It was that every person has the right to choose for themselves what they want for health, which would mean there could never be a mandatory vaccine. It's always a choice. There couldn't be like you're forced to do a certain type of thing. It's always your choice. Like as far as each person goes. And I was like, I'm for that. I wish that was in there because now when they're talking about like I'm not saying I'm for or against this vaccine. I personally for myself, I'm barely around anybody. I don't think I need to go get it. Like I probably already had it to be quite honest. And I shouldn't be forced to have to do it.
So are you asking, am I for there being mandatory vaccines in the
I'm
country? Is
saying, well,
that
kind
what
of,
you're
but I'm
asking?
saying, would you be for a constitutional amendment that said your body, your choice?
Hmm. Hmm. I'd really have to think about the ramifications and I think the potential clauses that may need to be put in
Like,
there.
except for Curtis,
Um,
except for those Curtis
well,
cheeses.
yeah, I think as long as I can decide for other people, then
Yeah,
it's okay, right? Um,
totalitarianism is amazing as long as I'm in charge.
yeah, right, totally. I think it's pretty short-sighted from a health perspective when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of individuals, if you don't have some type of regulations pertaining to health. And I think that that's why we have health departments and we have certain monitoring for infectious diseases. And if somebody has a communicable disease and they are at risk of spreading it to others that is highly infectious
Mm-hmm.
and highly deadly, I think it's irresponsible of the government and the people to not intervene if that's necessary. Specifically speaking, and I'm not even actually referencing
Yeah, because
COVID right
it's
now. I'm thinking more along the lines of like Ebola or something where it's like highly infectious, highly deadly in a short period of time. So if somebody says, "Hey, it's my body, my choice. I'm not going to seek treatment and I'm going to go around and do whatever I want. You can't
mhm.
quarantine me." Then I think that's pretty foolish. But
The other side is
so that's
pretty
why I would be
slippery though,
cautious as
like
far as that amendment.
because then it's like, what could they deem, like COVID, for instance?
Yeah, that's why I think there needs to be. I don't think that individual bill can be broad sweeping. I think there has to be amendments. There has to be certain pathways. I
Yeah,
think would be my opinion.
I guess I would.
Basically, and
I guess
anybody
with
that just
them,
like, and I think it's also kind of silly for somebody to instantly say, absolutely, yep, that's a. I think it's, I think a lot of this is what I have a lot of concern about when a question like that comes up. I feel like too often people instantly are like, yes, absolutely, it's my body, my choice, no matter what, in every way, shape, or form, no matter who it is, no matter what the situation. It's like, well, you say that until it doesn't work for you or it doesn't work for
right?
your family member. Like, so I feel like too many people are too quick to respond to that.
Well, and see, that's the thing is like you're assuming that they're just going to stick to that. So that doesn't mean that a doctor couldn't be like, "Hey, you really need to do this, like for these reasons." And
Yeah, but they could choose not to
they
then under
could,
that.
but I think most people, if it was logical and they were sitting down with their doctor, would be like, maybe not for a vaccine, but if they were like, you need to do this treatment, or
Yeah.
you're gonna die, or you're gonna hurt, or you need to stay away from people.
That would be the thing. If it was solely just impacting themselves,
Right.
that's one thing. But that's not always the case, unfortunately. And I agree with you. There are a lot of people that are very reasonable, but I also see many people in my life that are highly
No, I totally get
unreasonable
that. I just,
and
but I guess
selfish.
to me, when a lot of the laws that we have on the books are basically for stupid people. Like if we're being really honest, like it's like wear a seatbelt, right? Like, yeah,
And that was really
but
like
but
highly
like really, like
unpopular when that
if you're
first came
flying
out.
down the freeway, it's bad to hit something solid. Like,
So that's the other thing. Like, should that be maybe, well, under
right.
that law, that's
Yeah.
your body, your health, right? So that
Yeah, but it's
shouldn't
also a
be
safety thing because
taken away
some
then,
of those cars
right?
could be, some of those manufacturers could be held liable if they don't have them in there. I'm not going to make the seatbelt argument.
Right. But
Yeah.
that whole thing that
Hmm.
extends into seatbelts. That extends into many
Yeah.
things
Well, I would
that
say
are
like
not just
I guess I would
necessarily
say like
vaccine.
as far as it goes for seatbelts, like hey, that's if you're of it used to be if you're of a certain age, make the decision, like be dumb and smack the metal dashboard. But when it came
I
to
think
like
helmets. Anybody else? Isn't helmets a rule?
in a
Like,
car,
I think in some states, no. Like on a bicycle, I think some helmets, adults riding in a car with my
if
helmet.
I see you
But I
wearing a
think in
bike
some
helmet
states,
on the freeway,
adults.
I'm gonna have a lot of
Right,
questions.
right. I think in some states, adults still have to wear helmets on bikes. I could be
I
wrong
don't
on
think
that,
any state
but
regulates that at all because it would be so cumbersome to do so. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
dude. Speaking of like regulation, law, crime, that sort of stuff, um, I read a really crazy article this week talking about private prisons, and they did a really good analysis of state states that have private prisons versus states that are mostly federal or federally
I'm
run
fully against
or
private
state run.
prisons. You know, I've already sold.
And the private prisons, there was a consistent theme that if they had private prisons, without any fail, the private prisons um, consistently had higher occupancies and put more people in jail for a longer period of time than states that didn't have private prisons.
Yeah.
Um, and oftentimes in a lot of these states, this was crazy too. A lot of the states have agreements with the private prisons um, that they guarantee a certain percentage of
Occupancy.
occupancy. Thank you. That's a really weird. That was a hard one
That
for me to
was
say right
really
there.
difficult. I was letting it go though. I was gonna,
Occupancy.
free speech.
Isn't that
That's
crazy
how
to
for free speech
guarantee?
I am. I will let you make up
How
words all night
horrible is
long.
that? you. I appreciate that. How horrible is that to have a guaranteed occupancy for a state or for a prison? And if the state though, and there's like amendments, if the state doesn't lock up enough people, they have to pay the prison
That's just to guarantee their
for the
pay.
missing people.
It's yeah. You don't need to convince me. Like we have 4,000% plus prisons, like prison inmates after they went private. Dumbest thing we've ever done. Like, yeah.
So terrible. Gary mentioned, he said that Washington, he does believe that Washington is mandatory for bicycles.
Guess what? Guess what? I would gladly ride down the street right next to a police officer without one on. I just
in Washington, you're like, I'm a rebel.
Yeah.
You and your bandana. Okay, so let's see here. I don't have any other major things I want to hit on.
So there's a couple things I wanted to say.
Anything?
I'm gonna put this in our show notes. It's a really good video, and I want you to go watch it too. I wanted to send it to you earlier today, but I knew you wouldn't watch it. It's a short snippet of a speech that Julian Assange did, and a quote in it that's so good.
Nice.
What he's doing is he's harping on media companies. He said he thinks that they're warmongers, that they incite war by the lies that they tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I, can't argue with the dude who started WikiLeaks.
Mm-hmm.
He said, at the end of it, he said, if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then another thing I would say to people that are like, have a hard time, because I'll be honest, like I have a hard time watching CNN sometimes. It doesn't mean that I don't watch it. I think it should be there. Like, I think they should be held to a media standard of telling the truth. But hey, I guess the truth is subjective these days. But Martin something or other, anyway, he has a really strange last name that I don't want to even try to pronounce. And I'm sure some people have heard it before, but it's interesting, and it's good to think about, because even if like I'm probably like center conservative leaning, and you're probably like out in left field, but I'm just joking. I'm just joking with you.
No, just definitely not.
That you're just communist. That it's something to think about, like when it comes to free speech, how important it is to allow the speech to happen that you don't agree with. Much, because if it's untrue, it's untrue. That's where I struggle with the whole Facebook, Twitter thing. If it's untrue, it's untrue. It's fine. Then speak the truth. Like Julian Assange says, peace can be started with the truth. But this guy said, first they came for socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
You said Martin?
I'll put it in the show notes. It's like a
Martin
German last name.
Okay.
It's like I can't. It's got some letters I don't know how to pronounce. So.
Yes, though, absolutely. I completely agree that free speech is important.
Carrie informs me I'm incorrect. Okay, so here's where we stand on the conversation with the Washington helmet laws. Someone's wrong, someone's right, and it's probably Gary's right. If I remember any conversations I've had. Well, I mean, sometimes Deb's right, I guess. That's my aunt and uncle, and she's probably saying,
like that. And Haley Lambert, I'm not sure who that is, but Haley Lambert made a comment. She asked me if I've read much Plato. And actually in undergrad we had to read quite a decent amount of Plato, but it was not something that I can recite back to you the specific arguments that he made. But I did have to read some Greek philosophy, and he was I enjoyed it, but I think I enjoyed it mostly because my instructor was a really, really articulate instructor, and he helped to kind of break down the thought processes that crazy, wild, silly, ridiculous, hormonal 19-year-old boy didn't care much about at that time. So, but yeah, anyways, good stuff. Anybody want to hit up some TILs?
I don't have any. So
today all right.
I'm really going to learn.
I'll throw them down. I only have two.
Haley's just keeping asking you questions. This is her love language.
Oh, they're not showing up on mine.
They should be now.
No, well, I'll refresh.
I put it on your screen. You should be able to see it on your screen now.
My screen.
With me.
See yours. It cuts off on my when I see it on your side.
Oh.
From my screen. So what's it? Can you
Do
tell me
you
what
like Socrates?
Do I like Socrates? Well, he was the instructor of Plato, if I do recall. Right? Wasn't he? I think he was the teacher of Plato. So I'm pretty sure we had to listen to some of Aristotle or not Aristotle, Plato and Socrates. I think that's right. They were all connected. Plato was the student of Socrates, and Socrates was the teacher of Aristotle. I think. I could be wrong. But yeah, I did enjoy listening to their lectures. They make for really good debates. That's for sure.
She said yes, he was.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So my first TIL.
Go for
TIL. Today I learned that fast food. This was interesting. Fast food restaurants frequently use Columbus, Ohio, to test out new food products because the demographics of the city closely resembles those of the country as a whole. So for some reason, Columbus, Ohio is the quagmire, the combination of everything that is the most kind of, I don't know, diverse. Okay, last TIL. Today I learned that Sweden, this is wild. I would have never guessed this. Sweden has 267,000 islands, making it the country in the world with the most islands. Check it out. Sweden, most islands. Would not have guessed that. Shower thought. How many shower thoughts you got?
A few.
Okay, I got 4, so.
I have at least 4.
Okay, I'll go first.
I was still seeing if there were comments. Gary did want to clarify.
Oh, yes. Helmets, it's a helmet law.
Are state mandatory for motorcycles.
Yes.
So it's just like, since we're a safe place, we want to make sure that we get the correct information out there as best we can. If you're right, reasonable. I agree with wearing helmets on a motorcycle.
Just not a bicycle.
Just bicycle. I don't ride that fast. Like it's annoying. I gotta carry one more thing.
Fair enough. Okay, first shower thought. Life is too short. The quote, "Life is too short," is usually used to justify doing something that will probably make life shorter.
That is very true. That is so true.
Right?
It's like hold my beer. Like that.
Yeah,
you're going to be holding it for a while.
Yeah.
Because
Plato would have probably had that same thought, Haley.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Finding an eggshell in an Egg McMuffin is both annoying and reassuring.
That's so true. Yes, it is reassuring. I feel like it honestly is probably more reassuring.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, they used eggs in this one.
Yeah. Okay. So whether you choose to do CPR to the beat of Staying Alive, so everybody, the most common things they say you staying alive to do when you're doing compressions, that
all I can think of is Michael Scott doing the beginning. First it was Faye. No, not that one.
Oh, first that was Faye.
He does it really slow. He's like he does the beginning of Staying Alive.
That's so good, Michael Scott. Yes. Okay, so let me start over. Whether you choose to do CPR to the beat of Staying Alive or Another One Bites the Dust determines if you're an optimist or a pessimist.
It's true.
Because they have the same tempo.
I definitely
Another One Bites
probably
the
go for the latter just because it's more fun. It's
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
The Tooth Fairy allowed us to sell our bodies at a young age.
That's true. It's terrible. That's true though. Oh my gosh. Ooh. I'm part of that. I'm part of that.
Here's a good little history lesson. My grandpa voted for mandatory helmets on motorbikes. He was a socialist.
What a socialist. See? There's good things that come from government regulation at times. Okay. So, if you are what you eat, then cannibals are just normal people. Get it?
Can't really argue with that.
Can't argue with it. But it's terrible. But yeah. All right, hit me.
would they become that kind of? Would they be like that kind of person? I just guess I'm just trying to take this way too
Yeah,
literal.
it was like a here kind of shower thought, and you
Y-
took it like
I
you
was
took it way up, way
way
above
up
these
there.
mountains
Yeah,
here.
I like how
Yeah,
your camera like removes your microphone sometimes, so there's like mountains in
I
your
know.
face. It's great.
Pretty.
You
It's
need a
pretty.
light. You need a light. You need to just bring one of our lights up when we do this.
Yeah, that's true.
Bread goes into the toaster as a slice, but it comes out a piece.
True. That's true. Yeah. That's a good shower thought. I like that. Makes me hungry actually.
I'm
Um
gonna go eat toast.
I'm gonna go get some
Can I get,
toast.
get a sandwich with just a
Just a little bit jelly.
little bit of peanut
Okay,
butter?
my last shower thought. The same technology that allowed us to evolve mechanically may be the same technology that prevented us from evolving biologically, because we adapt to the environment to our advantage. Well, because we adapt the environment to our advantage instead of us ourselves adapting to it. It's kind of a wild thought.
That's really I feel like whoever wrote that hadn't evolved quite yet. Like they weren't
Oh,
they hadn't caught
no,
that thought.
I think they're catching on to the fact that we're going to turn into little gray men with big heads,
They,
and our bodies are
do you
just
know
going to keep
okay, do you know what
wilting.
that's based on?
Melting.
Do you know what that's based on?
Oh,
It's because the other type of life form that we know that could exist would be based not on carbon but on silicon. So it's a silicon based life form. That's why they
makes sense.
portray aliens that way.
Makes sense. I believe it.
It's weird. Okay, so last shower thought. It's not your money. It's just your turn to play with it.
Right. Right. It's even weirder though when you get to a form of being actually electronic currency.
Yeah, yeah. That's we could have a whole podcast talking about how
Different
that
one.
works.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it, folks, for this week. Thank you for tuning in to Testing Normal, episode 87. Thank you for all your fun comments. Thanks for giving us a like on Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe. Click that little button on Facebook so you'll get a little notification when we come on.
If things go dark, we're on Rumble now too. BT Dubs, just the last episode we started.
Little rumble. Yeah,
we've said
let us
some
know what
things
you
that are
like.
kind of
Let us know what you
questionable.
don't like. And we always will, and that's okay.
And we always will,
Freedom
which
of
is
speech,
why I
baby.
decided to have a backup.
There you go. That's good.
And,
all right,
yeah.
guys. We'll have a fantastic week, and we will talk to you soon. Peace
See
out.
you guys.